To introduce you now to our next speaker, Stuart from IMC. So Stuart's come all the way over from Toronto. Stuart runs an artificial intelligence company based in Toronto. He's going to tell you all about it, but needless to say, I feel that artificial intelligence is one of the seminal technologies that's going to take our financial markets to the next level. Stuart may tell you about neurolinguistic pattern matching, which is much more interesting. I just call it AI.
So it's really quite a pleasure to be here speaking in quite literally the Church of Technology. And as I think about it that way, artificial intelligence actually is a little bit like religion these days. A lot of people are talking about it and have all sorts of preconceptions of what it is or what it could be, and it may not be a lot. So what I wanted to do is talk about it from a very high level. So if you're not an expert in AI, it's good. If you are an expert in AI, it might be a little bit boring. But at the same time, I'm hoping that one of the things that I'll do is give you some framing, because we work with a lot of large financial institutions and insurtech as well. And what we find is that there's a lot of misconceptions and there's a lot of misframing where people don't think that AI is a solution, or they do think AI is a solution. So I'm hoping that my talk will help address that. So just a little bit about me. I'm the CEO of a company called IMC. My background is really in behavioral economics and organizational behavior. I am from Canada, and IMC is IBM Watson's lead partner in Canada. So we do a lot of work in AI. And I wanted to start by having a little game, if you will, with you guys, give you a little challenge. And what I'd like you to do is just take a look at a screen wherever they may be relative to you. And I want you to try reading the color of the word, but not the word itself. So for the first three, it's red, green, orange. So if everybody wants to take a try, do it out loud if you like, or do it quietly to yourself. It doesn't really matter. But just give it a little shot and see how you do. It's a little challenging. You might actually find yourself laughing as you're doing it. One of the reasons, actually, which is really interesting, and I am in the industrial psychology world, is that laughter is actually confusion of the brain. So when you tell a joke and there's a punchline that doesn't connect, that makes you laugh. So what's happened here is we have confused your brain. And the way we've confused your brain is if we looked at the left side of your brain, there's the semantic processing area of your brain, which is for visual word processing. And it's right about there on your brain, or there, or there, or there. And there's the color recognition area of your brain. And those two areas are totally separate. So when you were looking at the colors, what was happening is actually you were speaking very staccato if you were saying it out loud. And what's happening is that you're actually having a fight. The best analogy for the brain that I believe in is called a neural parliament. And I guess you guys are having neural parliament issues right now, more than most. But what you have is you've got the visual word section, and you've got the color recognition section, and they're fighting each other. And so the reason that you're reading staccato is that you actually have to conclude and then produce. Whereas if you're reading just words, you'll just flow very smoothly. So effectively, if we're looking at that and talking about this, what happens is that we have built-in prejudices, which we may call intuition in a lot of ways. And so you get all this data coming in, and then your brain is processing it in all these different areas all at once, and then trying to come to a conclusion. So you may look at me and look at the way I'm dressed and conclude about me, and that may be relevant because you're going back in memory and somebody you hated had the same jacket as me, and therefore I'm not very interesting right now, or you know something about people with red hair, or any of these things. If we look at it in terms of AI, you have a whole different world here, because what we're able to do with AI is we're able to actually turn on the areas we want and turn off all the other areas. So what happens with AI, if we were going to read the colors in AI, what I would do is I would actually tell the artificial intelligence, don't read, recognize color. So I would actually program it so that it can't read. And therefore, it would do the colors instantly and properly every single time. So when we think about it in that sense, the AI would always win. And it's actually very simple. And because of that, AI is incredibly powerful because it removes layers of our perception. And if you can think about AI in that way, it's really just a narrow slice of our own abilities. It doesn't have any distractions. It's got 100% focus on what it's doing. So a lot of people talk about signal to noise. There's no noise because AI is unaware of the noise, whereas you come with all these biases yourself. So if I ask you to read 500 papers, at some point you're going to get tired, you're going to miss things, blah, blah, blah. The computer doesn't. So what I want to do is I want to talk about AI in the context of FinTech. And what I think is that you would describe this as service AI when you're talking about FinTech for the most part. And the challenge with AI is that it's such a broad concept that it's hard to place very specifically. So what I think that service AI is it's AI that actually offers some form of service to a person, like customer service, or like observations on portfolios, or any of these things, as opposed to AIs like self-driving cars, where tons of AI in a self-driving car, but that AI is invisible to you. You're just looking for a ride. So the first area to cover is machine learning. And what I'm going to do as I talk about this is I'm going to give you examples of the worst, the best, and the future for all three of the types of AI I'm going to talk about. So what is machine learning? Essentially, to keep it really, really simple, what it is you put data in, and the machine recognizes patterns. So patterns come out. So in order to do that, you need to have specific training, and then there's specific education. So an example of this would be the worst of machine learning. So I got an email the other day from the Nigerian prince who told me that if I send him 10,000 pounds, he will give me my share of the $20 million that's held up because of, I don't remember the issue, but I trust him because he spoke to me very nicely in the email. And so I go to the bank, and this is actually a real, based on a real case study that we were working on of a bank client of ours who employed an AI, and it was a total failure. Did the job perfectly, total failure. Because what happens is when I show up at the bank and I say to the teller, I want to transfer my 10,000 pounds to Nigeria, she doesn't know what to do. So what she does is she would typically have called the bank technical answer line and asked the question. And somebody at the technical answer line would tell her what to do. Now, what fails here is they tried to implement AI to learn all of the possible questions and then allow a relatively natural language, like a Google search, of their database of all the things the teller could possibly ask. And what happens was it would come back and say, with 87% certainty, this is the answer. I bet you couldn't find a bank teller anywhere in England who would be willing to transfer money on 87% certainty, because there's a 13% chance they're going to lose their job. So that's an example of failing AI. If you looked at it the other way, with machine learning, what the machine could learn is that a whole bunch of people transferred their money to Nigeria, and those people who transferred their money to Nigeria also had very poor net promoter scores or very poor impressions of the bank, or they phoned and complained about the bank or something like that. If you machine learned the two together, what you would then conclude is don't allow people to transfer money to Nigeria. And that would be a great example of using machine learning effectively. The future of machine learning, in my opinion, is where machines start making the decisions themselves instead of using a training set. So a training set for machine learning would be something like the car saying, don't hit the humans, and then Sasquatch walks across the street, and it goes, it looks enough like a human, I think we shouldn't hit it either. And that's where we're going to see things go, where you don't have to teach it, because right now you have to do a lot of teaching to be able to get an output. And the problem is that when you teach it biases that you have. And therefore, when you get outputs, the outputs aren't necessarily absolutely free, zero gravity outputs. They're constrained by the gravity of your assumptions. So that covers off machine learning. Chatbots, which is a very key area, and whenever I'm talking anybody in FinTech, they're like, oh, chatbots are going to be huge, and bot-based financial advisors and all of this stuff. So what is a bot? Well, a bot is really just a series of algorithms that understand a question that's asked and provide an answer that's expected. So I think a really bad example of a bot, and we actually have a client in the pizza business, or in the food business in general, and so we started looking around at how bots were used in fast food, and what we found here, and I would call this overreaching, I go to order a pizza, and it says, what size pizza? And I say a large, and it says, what toppings? And I'm gonna be at home that weekend, and I'm by myself, so I say, I'll take cheese, mushrooms, chocolate, and Nell McAndrew. Why not, right? And then it says, okay, one large pizza with cheese and mushrooms, is this correct? Because obviously, chocolate isn't a valid topping, and Nell McAndrew might be wonderful with a pizza, but they're not gonna supply it. So if you look at it in that context, it then drops me out of the process and says, what size pizza? So I broke the system because I gave it answers it wasn't expecting. And this is actually a pizza ordering bot that you can go and interact with. I won't mention the company because that would probably be slander. But it proves that you have to think about how you deal with exceptions with bots, because interpolating exceptions is really challenging. I think that a bot could be a helper, and it's easy to get a bot to be a helper, and this is actually what we concluded that we're actually implementing this for our client. They deliver a pizza in 45 minutes, but they get a lot of calls to the call center in the scenario where the pizza's late, or people are worried that the pizza's gonna be late. So we said, okay, on the 46th or 47th minute, what would happen if we messaged you? So we're gonna either Facebook message you or SMS you, and we're gonna say, how is your pizza? And then you say, I haven't got it yet, or anything like that. And we've actually short-circuited a process, and therefore we've improved service by adding a bot in. And then we can make decisions when to transfer the person to a live operator. Can the bot just handle it? All of these things can be decided. So I think, though, the future of the bot is for the bot to actually look at you and understand. And this is a huge challenge in financial services, where there's a dichotomy of purpose in financial services. Financial service companies want to push you online because you're cheaper to deal with. The economics make sense. But if they don't get you into the branch, they can't upsell you. And the challenge here is that when they build a bot and deploy it, and there's lots of examples of bots that have been deployed and then rolled back, that one bot has one personality and services you in one way. And then they service me in the same way, and they service everybody in the same way. And yet we're all different people. And if we went to a teller, the teller would understand that. So I think that the bot being able to understand you will solve that problem. Now, how do we get there? Well, that's the last piece of AI that I'll talk about today, which is natural language processing. And natural language processing is pretty simple. It's about understanding a series of possible questions. So it borderlines with machine learning in the sense that we would have a training set, for example, to answer the weather. How does Siri know that you've asked a question about the weather? Well, what they do is they program in a training set. Is it hot today? What's it like out? Will it rain? And then it knows the answer is provide the person the weather. It's raining and warm, thank goodness. But it can also interpolate. So if you say, is it hot out, which isn't one of the questions, it understands the series of questions and then can figure out that hot out and what's it like out is similar, and therefore it can answer. So a bad example of this is something called Microsoft Tay. I don't know, has anybody heard about this? So Microsoft, in order to show how awesome their bot power was, came up with this thing called Microsoft Tay, which was supposed to be a teenage girl. And they launched it at about 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they took it down at about 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you can read there, that was the most polite one we could find. They basically got Tay to swear and say horrible things about people. And that was because Tay was learning and repeating and retalking. So here we have Tay basically retweeting dirty stuff and negative stuff, which is quite amazing. But this is what can happen because what they didn't do is they didn't set boundaries for Tay's performance. So, for example, there's certain words that begin with F that should have been ruled out, so Tay couldn't say them, and yet nobody created a list of things Tay can't do. And this is very typical, because what happens is people become exuberant. And we become exuberant, we go, wow, this is really exciting, it can do anything, let's make it do anything, and we assume that people will be good. Well, I don't think I have to tell people from the land of Bodie McBoatface that, consumers do crazy stuff. And they do it for fun, and then people pile on, and then the next thing you know, Microsoft Tay is dissing people. So I think that the best of NLP is all around understanding the human factors. And this is, I think, a typical story. If anybody here is married or lived with someone or spent extended period of time with somebody, they've probably been in one of these situations where the answer to will you take out the trash is I guess so, and then the person who asked you the question is upset with you because you said you would do it. But really the answer is that I guess so is a conditional answer. And so if you think about it, I guess so is really like saying, I don't want to, but I will. And so the question is, can natural language processing begin to learn that? And as it can learn that, it can then learn your sentiment. And as it understands your sentiment, and for example, you're dealing with a bot, the bot can start to say, wait a second, this person's upset. In Canada, we would say pissed off, or pissed, but that might be something different here. The concept, though, is that as it can understand you, it can now relate to you. And then it can also understand how to categorize you and what to do with you and all sorts of stuff around that. So I believe that the height of all of this AI, and we've made a huge bet on this as a company, is called neurolinguistic pattern matching. And what neurolinguistic pattern matching is it's the action of taking live speech data, and so natural language, and processing it to actually come up with a personality profile. So we're able to actually derive on 130 different variables, each one with a scale of 1 to 100. So if we had two identical twins and we ran them, and we actually did this, they would actually come up with different personalities because they could be even off. One could be an 83 and one's an 87. You would find that you would identify differences. And in doing that, I can actually derive your personality. So now the machine can understand who you are and then better how to talk to you. So how do you use this? Well, you use it to understand personality. And if you can understand personality, the bot can suddenly customize its story. So you get into the situation where it knows how to talk to each one of the different players. And that ability is critical. Because if you can do that, you can now take financial services online in a way that provides the value add, the upsell, cross-sell opportunities, all of these different things in a way that allows you to understand consumers at scale. And that really kind of covers off the natural language processing part. So if you try to take this and bring it fully into the FinTech world, I think that framing is really important. Framing is the way you see it, and I'd like you to see it the way I see it. So what does a salesman do? Well, what a salesman does is the salesman actually listens to you, sizes you up. What are you wearing? What jewelry? What's your accent? What are the words you're using? And they predict and learn and tune the message to you, so that they can actually understand what you really want and what's going on under the hood, not the most obvious, not using the big data approach of, I saw your past actions, I'm going to predict your future actions on that basis. And if you can get there, then you can actually get at the person's motivations, you can satisfy them. And I think that a lot of technology these days needs to go there, because it tends to treat everybody as a one-size-fits-all. And we're working with financial service companies that have in their, for example, self-help or self-service trading, stock trading interfaces, where they provide you 100 tools. And the challenge with that is that with 100 tools, how do you know which ones are interesting to you? Well, if they understood how you thought, then they could uniform and reorganize the tools and start saying, okay, these are the top 5 tools for you. I'm not going to give you 100. and I'll give you ones that you value. And to me, this is the outcome that everybody needs to get to. Otherwise, we're just going to confuse people, and we're not going to get good use and good depth of use of new systems. So this goes up with this dichotomy of purpose. So how do you get that online to upsell? And the only solution is by understanding the consumer at scale. So if a bank is money with personality, and I love that as a definition of what banks are, and I believe that fintechs who are trying to deal with consumers are that, and their B2B banks are also that, then success is delivering personality with fewer people, because that's where the money is. The largest cost in banking tends to be the staff. So if you're trying to drive down costs, which is why everybody seems focused on fintech, it's going to be working with personality and machines. That's my story. I'm very happy to answer some questions.